So I have two iPhones here. On the one hand, the brand new generation iPhone 14 Pro. This packs a whopping 48 megapixel sensor and also comes with 3 incredible lenses, giving you an impressive zoom range. The other is the iPhone 6s. First released in 2015, it has just one 12 megapixel camera, which everyone was very excited about because it was a big upgrade over the iPhone 6 with its 8 megapixel camera. Here's the thing though, I think the camera on the iPhone 6s might just be better than that of the iPhone 14 Pro, and let me explain. So before kicking off with these side-by-side comparisons, I'm going to first talk about a couple of the things that obviously the iPhone 6s cannot compete with. Some of the obvious clear differences between these two phones. If you don't want to watch that, you just want to go straight to the side-by-sides, you can go to this time code of the video and it will take you straight there. So yeah, obviously the iPhone 14 Pro is a better camera system. It's a far more technically superior camera than the iPhone 6s. As much as anything, people just wouldn't be very excited about buying new iPhones if an iPhone from like 7 generations back was better than the current one. For one thing, there's those zooms we mentioned. Having a zoom range from ultra wide through to telephoto on the back of one phone is a more modern camera improvement, something obviously which a lot of smartphones are doing nowadays. I absolutely love it. I personally think that the telephoto is the lens I use the most. I absolutely love having that on the back of my phone. It makes shooting a ton more versatile. Another thing is the sheer sensor size. Of the past however many generations of these phone cameras kind of getting better and better, one of the physical improvements is the sensor size. The sensor size increase of the iPhone 14 is just far larger than that on the iPhone 6s, and that does come with tangible improvements, things that you just can't replicate on these smaller sensors, things like better low light performance. You have the opportunity to get a more shallow depth of field, and of course a big one is dynamic range. The first thing I want to talk about is the difference in focal ranges of these zooms. Obviously, as mentioned, the iPhone 14 Pro has those zoom ranges, so you can go right from ultra wide through to telephoto. The 6s is fixed at 1 focal range, and it is a 29mm equivalent. So on that main camera, the main sort of 1x shooter for both phones, you'll find that the iPhone 6s is actually a fair bit more zoomed in than the iPhone 14 Pro. The iPhone 14 Pro is wider. I actually really like the 29mm equivalent. My personal favorite focal range to shoot anything at, or pretty much anything, for instance like this video right now is being shot at 35mm. I think that's an absolutely great focal range. So having a phone that's a little bit closer to that on the main rear-facing camera is, for me, a big win. I was actually much happier with the focal range on that main camera on the iPhone 6s. So one key area of difference is resolution. With more megapixels becomes obviously more detail and more resolution, and this I do think is one area where the iPhone 14 Pro kind of pulls clear of the 6s. There is a substantial difference between resolution in these photos. I think this is particularly clear when you zoom in to any of these photos. I'm kind of fairly used to now being able to zoom in slightly on one of my shots on my phone and not have the quality be almost like drastically reduced. On the 6s, that is not true. You're probably not going to want to zoom very much into the photos taken with this, but at face value, side by side looking like this, you can't tell an enormous difference, but when zoomed in, that's when the resolution does start to show. So anyone who watches the channel here regularly will know I have two main complaints when it comes to smartphone photos. Normally that is HDR, and sharpness is the other thing. The iPhone 14 Pro is almost like leading the way in terms of sharpness. It has a habit of massively over sharpening the photos and videos that come out of its camera. And I think what's quite cool is that the shooting with the iPhone 6s actually almost fixes both of these problems. I do think the iPhone 6s is a little bit more subtle in the way it uses HDR in those photos. And my favorite thing is that it almost feels just like it's a little bit before an era of like strong over sharpening in terms of mobile photography. The iPhone 6s is a lot softer, almost like a more natural feel to the photos and video that come out of it. The iPhone 14 will take beautiful looking photographs, but I do think, to be honest, they have a habit of looking slightly fake, as discussed. I think skies are always a good indicator here. You can have a look at these two images side by side. First of all, the scene did not really look like this. It was a lot grayer. It's not been good weather here in the UK. It was definitely not as blue in real life as it shows in both of these photos, but the iPhone, as you can see, took this to another extreme. Instead of just allowing those shadows to be slightly softer, as you can see down here, it boosts those shadows right up, reduces the sky value, and you end up with a technically, almost like clinical good photograph, but it doesn't have as much character as the one coming out of the iPhone 6S. So now let's talk about the video capabilities of each phone. I'm going to switch backwards and forwards between the footage of each. While doing that, I want to talk to you about the sponsor of this video, Skillshare. Skillshare is a one-stop shop to pretty much learn anything online. One of my goals for this YouTube channel is to only promote and talk about products or services that I genuinely really use and genuinely are really passionate about. So you can see behind me that there's a course on Final Cut Pro from Ali Abdal. I actually took this course previously when I was learning Final Cut Pro 10 and it was insanely helpful. Skillshare has a ton of courses like this from an incredible roster of creators. As we head into the new year, maybe you're looking to start something new, learn something new, whatever your 2023 goals are, you can jumpstart them with this exclusive offer from Skillshare. With the link below, you can get a 7-day free trial of Skillshare and then get 20% off your first year of membership. Thank you to Skillshare for supporting the channel. Here's some more video comparisons here. So I've got two shots. First of all is this slightly low light shot, which obviously isn't super fair. So the iPhone 14 Pro clearly does a better job here due to that extra sensor size. You can also see with obviously these artificial lights in shot, the increase in dynamic range. There is just something though about the iPhone 6s's footage, which again is sort of almost like hard to put your finger on as to why it looks so nice. This was a much brighter outdoor shot, as you can see, and it's funny that you can actually see the iPhone 6s try to expose for the different things, whereas the iPhone 14 Pro is using its far superior software features to actually expose for everything all at once. I do have to admit, I really like the iPhone 6s footage here. And that brings us nicely onto the unquantifiable thing of character in photos. And I do think the iPhone 6s has more character. I think the iPhone 14 Pro's camera is getting better and better every year, or the iPhone in general is getting better and better every year. But I do think the character from their older generation phones is being slightly lost. I think a lot of it is that generally these phones are built for kind of everyday people who aren't almost like judging the quality of your photograph by things like how soft or how the highlight roll-off is looking. And as we pixel peep and really choose between photos taken on this phone or this phone, the iPhone probably is doing its job in terms of producing a clinically good photograph. But time and time again, for me anyway, I think side by side, the iPhone 6s photos, whilst they're not as high resolution, maybe they don't have as much dynamic range, they do have more character and a certain more vibe to it than the iPhone 14 Pros. Something I've never actually been able to put my finger on is something Apple have been doing in the last few generations of iPhone, and it is almost like an auto-enhancing photograph. This is particularly obvious when you decide to shoot in live mode, where you'll take a photo and you'll kind of look at the exposure on the phone, you hit snap, and then for some reason when you go and look, it doesn't really look like what you just saw. You can kind of see what I mean by looking at this here. You can see that this is a live photo I've shot, and then if I change the key photo from the element here, you can see that it's almost like snapping into place, and there's a lot of enhancement going on in my face, there's enhancement going on in the lighting. And again, there's no way of really turning this off unless you go into that live photo and change it every single time, and you might not want to be actually doing that. I think the iPhone 14 Pro deserves a quick sort of special mention in the area of low light performance, because actually I think the low light section of this video is really where the iPhone 14 Pro kind of just completely blows the iPhone 6s out. I think a combination of very, very advanced software features and also just better hardware, that increased sensor size means the iPhone 6s just can't really keep up, especially when there's motion in the shot. Any motion just gets pretty much completely blurred on the 6s. So I don't think anyone is going to be surprised when we say that the iPhone 14 Pro's camera is more technically proficient. It is a better camera in a more clinical sense. But I do think it's been a really interesting exercise to look at the older generation camera. This is a camera of, almost like 8 years of difference between the two. And I think most people will agree with me, the iPhone 6s actually did stand up pretty well. And I wish Apple would do these three things to learn from those prior generations of iPhone. They're actually doing things really well. First of all is to get rid of that weird auto-enhance feature, or at least allow us to actually turn that feature off. Not everyone wants to kind of look like airbrushed, and it's kind of just a bit weird. Secondly, I think we should hugely decrease the amount of sharpness that is being used in the iPhone shots, or at least that's automatically added by the iPhone. Thirdly, I think Apple should come around to the conclusion that not every single thing in a photograph needs to be exposed perfectly. It's okay to have highlights that are occasionally clipping a bit. It's okay to have shadows that are slightly crushed. These are not issues, and professional cameras do these all the time. I think I stand with everyone watching this when I say let's see what Apple do with the iPhone 15.